Hey everyone, thanks so much for listening in. I've got Jess Barrett here. She's one of my oldest friends. We've known each other for 18 years now, I think.
Oh my goodness, 18 years, that makes us sound old.
We are old, Jess.
We're not. We're in our 30s, that's young.
Middle age.
No, it's already
Not
middle age.
not even nowadays. But, Jess and I have done a lot of life together. We've been on mission trips. We've done youth. The youth was a mission trip.
Yeah, wild days.
And it was good fun. But this episode, we're going to be talking a lot about complexity, stress, and a big part of that is that Jess has a really interesting job, and we've been following what she does over the years. So Jess, why don't you tell us what you do with your job? What's that like? Or why is it complex and interesting?
Totally. So for those of you that I don't know, I work for an organisation called Compassion. And my role at the organisation is really interesting. I've got a job called a Field Experience Coordinator, which is a big term that no one understands. But basically my role is to take people on a journey of understanding the work that we do. And that means physically going and seeing it. So Compassion is unique to a lot of other ministries where all the work we do in our field countries is done through a local church.
Yeah.
So taking people on that journey and making sure that as we go on that journey, we're leaving a really light footprint. We don't want to impact the good work that the church is doing by taking away from it. But also for those that are coming from Australia, they may have never experienced poverty firsthand before. So taking them through that process in terms of debriefing and even just the spiritual significance of it, and then coming home and ensuring that they are all safe and able to reintegrate into life. There's this fun thing called reverse culture shock, where you come back from experiencing these kinds of experiences and your own culture then feels foreign and feels uncomfortable, and you can have the same effects as going into a new culture. So that's part of my job. Been doing that for a few years now. And I guess the complexities of it all come from, I travel a lot.
Yeah.
Which was obviously pre some of the things that are happening in the world today. But
It shall not be named.
Shall not be named. But I was looking at my stats. So for 2019, I took 45 flights. I was in the air for a total of 8.5 days. And that is an equivalent in terms of kilometres of 3.6 times around the world.
That is crazy.
Don't you love apps that can create all these stats for you? I don't actually have to
I was thinking you worked it out.
I do like stats, but that is just from a fun app. So that's complex when you're hopping in and out of very different contexts.
Yeah.
You have to maintain a normalcy and life here. I also study at the same time, and I'm really involved in my local church. So there's lots of different aspects of my life, and how do you manage that when you don't have a routine at all, really? Because you could be flying at the start of the month, 1 month, you could be away for 6 days, you could be away for 14, you kind of just have to manage that and then plan for your life around that.
So what kind of countries were you travelling to?
So the organisation I work for is in 25 different countries.
Yeah.
Wasn't going to all 25, but we are based...
Maybe one day.
Maybe one day. One day. We are mainly in Asia, Africa and Central South America. That's where our work is. So mostly Asia. 2020 was supposed to be a big year of Africa trips for me, but that's changed at the moment. So I think I've got my country list of places that I've visited, not just for work, but for pleasure as well, is sitting at about 26 countries at the moment. So it's really cool to be exposed to the world. It broadens your mind, and you just don't take some things that we might take for granted as much, because you see how different the world is to our small world here.
And I imagine that with the travel and taking teams of people to these nations, you have to watch how you're going culture shock yourself. But then there's also working with people shock, the culture of different churches and different teams. Yeah, was that something that could be quite disorientating for you?
Oh, totally. People are the messiest part of my job. It's not the long layovers or delays or whatnot. It's just dealing with people. I think you have that in everyday life, not just if you're traveling lots. You're always going to be interacting with someone new, or whether it's through church, whether it's through work, or even just like going to the supermarket. These days people are interacting with each other verbally, obviously not physically, a lot more than they used to. And I guess the like complexity of all of that lands itself in how do you view people, and where do you yourself find balance in who you are, I guess. So even though I'm interacting with so many different, even like denominations and expressions of faith, Christian faith, but so many different aspects of that, you would think, oh yeah, you work through the local church, but having worked for the organisation I work for now, I've been exposed to just so many different expressions of Christianity. Yeah. And I've seen beauty in so much of it. And so actually coming from a posture of, these differences are a bit of a tension, going, actually there's beauty in that, and seeing people as people, fundamentally we're all humans. Yeah. And you kind of start to learn to manage that. I don't know if that answers your questions. I've already forgotten what your question was.
Well, there's such a tension of appreciating the beauty in different groups of people from different nations, different churches. At the same time, I guess having a sense of who you are when all that noise has died down, and going, what do I believe? What do I value? How do you work through that?
It's funny because I go back to my own home church, which I love. Like, I love my church. It's my community. But sometimes I'm like, oh, that annoys me the way we do that. Because I've seen someone else do it like this. And something I've learnt along the journey is the stuff that frustrates you is often what God's called you to do something about, whether it's injustice, whether it's people around you, and if you can channel that in the right way. So when I come back and I see those things that frustrate me in my own church, I'm like, I can't change that if I get up and leave. I can only change that from the inside, and go, hey, maybe we should think about things like this. And also at the same time submit to leadership and go, if they like, hey, that's not really the direction at this season, at this time, okay, I can deal with that. So I think that it's really important to listen to yourself when you feel those frustrations and when you feel that tension, and really check your heart to the Word of God, obviously. Like we're all beautifully created with our own opinions, and if they're not aligning with the Word of God, then maybe rein them in. But if they are, then express them. God's also given you a voice, and you should use that voice. Yeah,
fantastic. So when you come back from a trip, do you have a certain practice, a certain few things that you do to kind of recenter yourself?
Yeah, definitely. My trips can be really high stress sometimes. Things can go wrong, and so coming back home, once I get home, I'm actually physically exhausted. So practically, even though I'm an extreme extrovert, like on that spectrum of I'm nowhere near the center, I'm like extrovert. And so I need people in my life. And at the moment, I have a housemate, but for a season I was living alone. And I had to learn that, no, I'm physically exhausted. I've had to make big decisions. I've been leading people. So I need to rest. So that was a whole day of isolation.
Which you're getting plenty of now.
Which I'm getting plenty of now. But it was actually a day of like, hey, I'm just going to sleep in. I'm going to do a little bit of reading or Netflix binging, maybe go for a walk on, like actually alone time. And then knowing that being an extrovert, I can't stay in that place for too long. So slowly starting to go, okay, I need to catch up with some friends to refill that tank of mine. And something else I learned, that as the busyness of everything, and how inconsistent my schedule was, I actually had to be really proactive with planning that, because people's lives don't match up with my life. So I was coming home and having these midweek days off, and I would have no friends available because they were working, so to catch up with me. And so I actually would plan catch-ups with friends, with family dinners and whatnot, before I even left. So I was preparing for that rest before I came home.
That's so good.
I had to learn that skill. At first I thought I was invincible and could do everything. And
as we all do.
I mean, mostly I am, but I'm kidding if you don't realize. I'm being sarcastic. But it is like this I have to plan, I have to make a plan to have no plan, essentially. I'm very, growing up and when I was younger, I was very spontaneous. And as my life got more complex and busier, I actually realised that I didn't have space to do that. I began to fill my life and then I wasn't getting the rest and recovery. So recovery and rest can be quite different. Recovery for me was the catching up with people, going out and about, doing social things. Whereas rest...
It's more physical.
It's physical. It's
like hydrating, eat good food.
Eating healthy food, that sort of stuff. I had to make a plan for that because my life became so full with study, with relationships, with work, that if I didn't actually plan that, it wasn't going to happen. And that happens to everyone, not just in people that work like I do. I think it happens in life these days. So being really intentional about how I recover and knowing myself in that. So I had to know how I recover. I realised that not everyone is as extroverted as me. So maybe a few more days of isolation helps people. But we all need connection though. Even if you're an introvert, you still need to connect with other people.
But I think what I love is that sense of prioritizing or knowing the importance of rest and recovery. And I think sometimes we think that if I plan rest, then it's not really rest for some reason. Because it's almost like, well, that's work, isn't it? Planning to rest, planning to do this. And so if I want a recovery, I will just feel it and I'll ask for it. But the complexity of our life really doesn't allow for it. And like you said, people's lives don't always match up. And so what do? We just go on Facebook, Instagram, scroll through, think that we're connecting, but we're just feeding ourselves junk sometimes.
So that plan to have no plan, which so is ironic in itself, is actually kind of how that works sometimes. Fantastic. Let's talk about stress. And you've already mentioned a little bit, and going on these trips, you are making big decisions. I remember we went on a trip and to Indonesia. We brought some medicines for some of the medical ministry we were going to do. We got to the airport and was it like half or 2/3 of the medicines were basically confiscated straight away? I reckon it was like 5/6. We were left with very little. That
was stressful.
I can tell you that story just for the sake of our listeners. So we were on this medical mission trip, and in previous years we had done it. It wasn't our first one, so we just followed the same planning as we had always. But things had changed and rules had tightened a bit, and we actually hadn't got all the paperwork that we officially needed. And the organisation that we were partnering with weren't aware of it either. And so we arrived in Indonesia, and literally at that customs line that mostly gets ignored, they pulled us aside, took all our boxes, took me as the trip leader into a side room, and I'm just like, oh Lord Jesus, help me, and basically said, you don't have any paperwork for these medicines. A lot of the vitamins and things we had were out of date, so we had done some research through a local doctor, and he said that the vitamins are still good for a year after the use by date because of strong rules in law in Australia, but we can still use them. And so it meant that pharmacies were giving it to us for almost free in order to get it off their shelves because they can't sell it, but it was still actually good and good to use. And so we then thought, went through the whole process. They confiscated everything at that stage. And we had arrived quite late at night. We go back to the hotel and had another domestic flight early that morning. So myself and a couple of other people, like the doctor that we had with us, and I think another pastor came with me. I can't remember now. But we went to the customs office, and they wouldn't even let me go in and see our stuff. They let the doctor in, and he grabbed what he could. So he literally, all we got out of that was a handful of stuff. and they confiscated it all. And I remember going, God, we're doing this to help people. What is going on? And long story short, we actually ended up finding local distributors of medicine that we needed that we could then sow into that local economy by buying that, which is better development in the long run. But so that was a high stress situation, and those kinds of things happen as you lead trips all the time. I do some trip leader training for work as well with other people that lead trips, and I have so many stories to tell them of things go wrong, and they're like, no, seriously. I'm like, they do.
They really do.
And I remember one time I was in Uganda and we had some police pull us over, and they were like, you guys have hit someone and killed them, and not killed them. They were just like, you've hit someone, police in other countries always carry big semi-automatic weapons. So they're basically dressed as people from the army. So it can be quite intimidating if you're not used to that. And so they're yelling at us and yelling at our driver, and they've pulled us over. They've basically surrounded our bus. And I've got a group of 25 Australians on this thing going, what's going on? I'm like, I don't know, stay calm, everybody. And I think we were like reading Psalms out aloud and praying as we were on the bus and negotiating our way out of the situation. We hadn't done it. There was no evidence that we had done it. And at the same time, my security training has taught me to be like, is this someone actually doing something wrong? Are they going to ambush us? Like, all these different things are going on in my head. So it's a very stressful moment. And that trip had lots of things going on. So stress is it's a thing that happens to all of us. And sometimes it's not in the same extreme sense that I've experienced in the field. But it happens to us in our day-to-day. Like, you can be stressed about whether you're going to get toilet paper or not.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? And I think the thing I've learned about stress, so yes, too much of it is really, like, there's research that says it's bad for us physically. Too much of it is not good. But some stress is good, because stress actually points us to God. Because you get to this point of, hold on, there's nothing I can physically do, and you start getting overwhelmed, and the only thing you have to turn to is God. And so for me, I'm like, how do I deal with stress? Is realizing I have abilities to do things and make decisions, yes, and I do that when I can. But also knowing that there's a bigger picture, there's a God who's in control of everything.
Absolutely.
And that just sort of reorientates your stress sometimes. So I think stress is good because it pushes us to find that, hey, I can't do everything myself. But also it's, bad at the same time.
I think I get what you guys are saying, that, it is really important in stressful situations to do what you can do. And as for us as Christians, it includes going to God, praying, believing that He's sovereign and He's got this under control. But it definitely does kind of make you focus in on trying to solve the problem, I guess. So not forgetting God is always part of the solution.
And like it doesn't have to always be that big. Like, I've got so many funny stories or crazy stories of God intervening or me having to step up and do stuff. But at the same time, you have stress in your everyday. Like, I have stress about what I'm going to wear sometimes. Like, I know that sounds really pathetic, but that is just, okay, that can even turn you towards God. Am I focusing on image, or am I focusing on who God says I am at the same time? Do you know what I mean? So it doesn't matter how small the stress is, there's still a way it can point you towards God and who He can be and is in your life.
Absolutely. So one of the things that you were saying as we were chatting and getting ready for this conversation was you raised the question of, like, do people actually get desensitized or maybe even addicted to stress?
So with the frequency of how, like, these high stress situations I get put in, every month or every other month I'm abroad. I was abroad. And that stress takes its toll on you as a person. And I had been seeing someone professionally to help deal with that. My workplace is very proactive in helping and supporting us. And she had this conversation with me about, because I was getting a bit concerned. I was like, I don't react the same way I used to things. Things used to grip my heart, and I would be moved to tears very regularly. And I'm still moved to tears. Not as regularly, but I'm still moved to tears. And that concerned me. I was like, am I becoming hard? Because if I'm becoming hard, I don't want to keep doing what I'm doing. I don't want to not see people because I'm hard. But she brought up this thing of saying how it's so normal to be desensitized to stuff that you see a lot. And so she kind of framed it for me as, you're becoming desensitized to human suffering. And I was like, alarm bells, alarm bells. But then she caught me. She could see that I was like going, oh my gosh, I don't want to ruin, like, I have a mercy gift, and my heart is definitely has that bend towards justice. I feel like that's part of God's calling for my life.
Yeah.
But she kind of caught me and said, no, like, I think that some desensitization is good for longevity in your work. And I thought, oh, okay. And she said, obviously, there's a balance of keeping it in check. And she used the example of herself. And I hope I'm allowed to share the example. But I haven't said her name, so it's fine. She had said that as a psychologist, when she first started, that she saw lots of different clients, patients, and when she would come across people who had suicidal thoughts, it really gripped her, and it was actually a really hard thing for her to process. It, she would take it home, etc., etc. Now she says sometimes I see clients, like 3 clients in a day, that all have suicidal thoughts, and it doesn't have the same impact it has on her. And then she said, but it doesn't mean I'm a bad psychologist. It doesn't mean I'm a bad Christian. It doesn't mean I don't care. It just means that I've now got different tools to deal with that.
Yeah.
So when I look at stress, it's a fine line to balance of, you have to know yourself. Like if you, like, I know what my calling is and I know what my giftings are, and I could see that they were being impacted.
Yeah.
So if you don't know that in the first place, how do you then manage that? But in your own life, I guess, when you are feeling like stress and being desensitized to it, it's not always a bad thing. It could mean that you're getting the gumption to last the distance in what you're called to do. So first off, it's knowing who you are, knowing what you're called to do, and then being desensitized isn't always a bad thing. Yeah,
it sounds like the more you do it, the more you actually grow your capacity to do something about it, and maybe understand the situation at a deeper level, because you've seen and you understand maybe some of the underlying things that you don't see the first time you see it. And so it sounds like the desensitization is also because there's better coping mechanisms to some extent, which I think is great. That stress is not a bad thing. It does that that you don't maybe know everything.
What?
And it makes you freak out maybe, but then over time you learn and you grow, and that's part of life. Yeah, so I think I guess this is like straying away a bit from your question, but it is really important to know who you are and know who God called you to be, and you'll like actually continuously doing that. Yeah. I remember a few years ago I had a ministry role, so I wasn't working at Compassion, and I actually placed a lot of my identity in that because I linked it up with my calling. Yeah. And then when that role wasn't who I was anymore, so I wasn't performing that role anymore, it really affected my identity. Yeah. But I had to take time to realize, hey, I'm still actually called to this, because I know what this is, and it's different for everybody. Yeah. And so your calling doesn't change, your vocation and the way you apply it does. Yeah. So I think that's really important to know yourself and your calling. And I think in this season, we all have to remember that our society has put a lot of restrictions and necessary restrictions on our movements and what we can and can't do, and we do have to take time, and maybe there's a great opportunity to take time to ask God, what are you calling me to do, and who are you calling me to be? Yeah. So it's great. Well, that's all the time we have left for this interview. Thanks so much, Jess, for making the time, and we do apologize, listeners, if you heard my son crying in the background. Just woke up from his nap. But I think there was so much practical and helpful wisdom. And if you got any questions as you're listening to this, get in touch with us. We're praying for you in this crazy season. And God bless.